We are here in Connolly Books today, recording an interview with veteran Kilkenny Socialist Republican Richard Behal.
You were asking me about Princess Margaret. Maybe it was a late honeymoon or something. There was something, and she came to cousins of hers in certain ascendancy castles and houses in Ireland. Word was sent to us, and I would have believed that it did come down the line from Dublin, or and possibly cleared by Golding.
Is this about 1965? Is that the
64.
Okay.
64, and this was the first royal visit since, oh God, the turn of the last century.
Queen Victoria.
Yeah, so it was a seminal, it wasn't just a quiet visit to relatives. Like, she represented the royal family, who represent legally the British state. The Queen being the supreme commander of the army. It's not just an honorary title. She actually can. And the book stops with her or the king, whoever, Queen or king. This was kind of testing the waters as to whether we were anglicised enough again to kind of bring us back as bold children into the fold of the Commonwealth. And what was happening was one or two British warships around that time started to appear in what they call courtesy visits. And we felt that, that NATO, we were getting embroiled in international affairs. NATO was extremely anxious that Ireland would not be a Cuba, because they have this paranoia during the Cold War, had to be sure of. And this Royal Navy visits, courtesy visits by the way, in inverted commas, and then Princess Margaret, we felt, look, this has to stop. And we will stop it. And that was the reason. We just felt it wasn't just a visit as such, it was a Trojan horse.
Because I know there was things like cutting down trees and various protests the time Princess Margaret came. Because I know there was things like cutting down trees and various protests the time Princess Margaret came.
The cutting of the trees and all that was a protest, and of course she was missed on the first day, and several units of the IRA, I think we should go back to Princess Margaret because that was seminal for those actions. Orders did come down the line that the IRA were approving of protests and cut trees and block roads and draw attention that this royal visit was not going unprotested. Though no intent or instructions to endanger, but certainly to show that this softly catchy monkey policy wasn't going to go unmarked. So it was agreed to block the road so that she couldn't get into Burr where she was going that night. And so volunteers from different parts of the Midlands and everywhere, we all turned up on a road by pre-arrangement, and I remember arriving that night, and there was something like about 20 motor cars parked along this little bogged road up in the Midlands on the way around Burr. And lads, everyone trying to look inconspicuous, with big cross-cut saws with them. And we had raided a few foresters' huts, and we got the chainsaws, which were fairly new items at the time, back in the 60s. And, you had to be talking, it was funny, you can nearly write a book on it. But we all then took different roads to fell the trees, that when the convoy would come from Dublin, from Casement Aerodrome probably, that the road would be blocked. It was just that. It was an inconvenience, and then to grab the news. It was, if you like, propaganda, publicity by deed. So most of the roads were blocked, and we had some narrow shaves, I can tell you, but we took extraordinary precautions not to hurt anyone, because when a tree, cutting timber is very dangerous, falling trees across roads, even though it was coming up at night time, and we knew when the plane was due to land in Casement, and we knew, and we also knew it wasn't Casement then, but Baldonnel then, and we knew. So we reckoned about amount of time with Garda escorts. So we knew I think they were coming up around 11 o'clock at night, and it was winter, you know. So there weren't that many cars on the road in the 60s, but nonetheless, we didn't, under no circumstances did we want to hurt anybody or bad accidents. So we actually had stolen, you know, those old paraffin lamps they used to have at roadworks.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'd light them up and put them on the tree went down. It was a good crowd. I think there was about 40 to 50 volunteers that night in different areas involved. We were just one of the sections from South Kilkenny. And our convoy just got through on one road where one section were cutting a tree with cross cuts. And we were only sorry that we didn't have more cross cuts because we bought these bloody chainsaws and they were, oh God. However, we cut trees and we blocked our road, but the one road, the tree was just falling when the convoy came, and the convoy passed, and when they saw cars, they stopped cutting for safety. But in fact, it was the Royal Convoy.
Oh, right.
So and the convoy wasn't well gone, and they said we can't leave the tree half cut, so they just gave another little cut or two, crashed. So she was almost succeeded, but our unit in South Kilkenny, we were very frustrated by it. Because it was kind of a joke. Your Paddy couldn't even block a road, you know. So, three of us decided we'll go up and reconnoitre, because they had information that she was going to go from there to, what do you call it? Not Port.
Was it Abbeyleix Castle?
Abbeyleix.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to Abbeyleix on such and such a day.
And they were going to have a big ball or something.
Yeah, so we decided, this was only barely mentioned on our programme, so the operation that night was successful, got publicity and everything, but we didn't actually stop her. Okay, it was done, so as far as the authorities and everyone's concerned, it's over. But they knew now there was someone prepared to take some action. So they doubled up the escorts and doubled up everything for the movement to Abbeyleix. And we knew whatever chance we had before, the same tactic, cutting trees, wasn't going to work. And we decided, well, we're not just going to call it off, because we were full of fire. We were a kind of a strange section in South Kilkenny. We decided we were going to have another go, but with no point going in against the castle, because they'd be shooting. The special branch were bound to be reinforced and were bound to be dangerous, and probably our own British Secret Service security. So it had to be something different, and myself and another volunteer, in the middle of the day, nicely dressed, suits and ties and looking nice, and drove up right to the door of Abbeyleix Castle, the house, knocked on the door and came out yesterday. We said we're from the Press Association, and just making a preliminary visit to make sure that we know the house, so that we take good photographs and different things. And oh yes, and they were very nice to us. They fell for us. They were innocent days, and what we were doing was having a look around to see what we could guess at. And what I noticed was coming back out that there was a high tension ESB system coming into it, 10,000 volts, and into a transformer and feeding the castles. So we decided to spur a line. So the following night we gathered up some more volunteers. We're all one or two from Waterford, part of the unit, and the rest from South Kilkenny and North Kilkenny and around Innisteig. In Mid Kilkenny we had about 9 volunteers that night with 3 cars. And we brought 1 or 2 saws with us just in case to block back roads, so that we could escape back through back roads back to our base in Kilkenny. So we felt like we were a unit out of our area travelling up to the Midlands, but we told no one. It was just an operation we carried out, but we knew we were within the guidelines of what was allowed for Bor. And we travelled up and we had made a very good bomb in a very strong steel container, but open on the top, and we laced that in between the top layers of gelignite bicycle chains, because the idea was to throw a rope over the wires and have the bomb then tied under it with the bicycle chains in it, and then pull the rope and pull the bomb right up under the wires. Now, a very tricky, dangerous operation. And that we didn't use any electrical detonators, because electrical detonators, if they come in proximity to magnetic fields, can explode. A lot of volunteers have died that way over the years. With burning fuses, or two burning fuses for double protection, if you like. If one failed, the other wouldn't. And so just two of us went on that operation, while the other guys went away from the castle, not anywhere near it, not any of the main roads, and she was already in the castle. We knew that she was on the news, we were there in the day, so we we're trying to block her coming in. What we were trying to do is cut off the Garda chase, and that we would have the way out on the little roads, no main roads, to get back to base, to Kilkenny. And it worked perfectly. We went down, and the trouble is, it was a rainy night, started to rain, and I was getting worried because the rope was getting wet, and I wasn't, not being that high up in electricity as I should have been, was there any slight danger that the rope might conduct, it was too wet. And anyway, we took a chance, threw the rope over with a brick or stone that we got in wrapped wire and tied it, stick with a stone out of it. We managed to get it over. It was pitch dark, but we could see it silhouetted against the sky a bit. They came down, tied on the bomb, and after blessing ourselves, because to be honest with you, that kind of thing, you are dealing with very danger, especially the dynamite, the gelignite, or some of the stuff left over from the border campaign, and it was pretty old and weepy, and it's nitroglycerine weeping. I mean, you've got to be very, very, very careful. But we pulled it up anyway and hoped against hope that the bloody thing didn't explode, because we'd be getting shrapnel and everything coming back, even though the thing was V-shaped in what they call the funnel effect for the explosion to go in the direction and bring the chains and all up. And once they hit the wires, the explosion would pass the wires. It wouldn't blow them, but any object hitting them would, and that's what happened. We just then tied the other end of the rope to the fence back a bit, and ran like fair hell with the two fuses. We see the sparks with the two fuses lighting going up, and we put it down. We only gave ourselves about 5 minutes. Subsequently, they'll give more, but you try and have the thing happen as quickly as possible, because you're not endangering anyone or yourself, and the longer you cut a fuse, the more danger of it failing. And but by the time we were with the rope and gingerly doing it, and then the night was darker with the light rain falling, so it was hard to know exactly when you had the thing near enough. You didn't want to tip the metal off the metal, just in case, for any reason of anything could go wrong. And we had lost probably 3 minutes of our time. A lesson learned. So then we ran like fair hell back towards where we knew the cars were on the side road in the forest, and it was an unmerciful blast. The whole sky lit up and everything, and we just kept running. Got to the cars. The lads had blocked 1 or 2 roads. With that, all hell broke loose. We could hear shouting and roaring back at the castle. The whole castle went in darkness. The branchmen were all around it with Thompson submachine guns, and it was complete pandemonium. But some squad car, just we about to pull out, did arrive up one of these little side roads and ran out in front of it, put up their hand like halt. We had 3 cars of volunteers, all doing their own, with several roads blocked. It was just a side road coming into our escape road. And well, we had brought with us, just in case of that contingency, a Molotov cocktail. So we lit that up and told the guards that, look, no trouble, we're all Irishmen, like, you know, no nothing, just move off. And so the squad car got a lash of the Molotov. When they said, we have to do our duty, you know, it's like in a pantomime. And no arms, she had no arms. The only thing we had was the Molotov, and that was just as a means of some escape. And throw it on the road if necessary with broken glass and petrol, stop pursuit. But the guards just didn't concentrate on pushing the car away from the flames and putting it out. We just struck off down the back road to Kilkenny, and that was that.
I know after that there was a lot of people arrested. Could you tell us something about the trial and the riot in Mount Mellick arising out of the protests against Princess Margaret?
Well, yes, there were widespread raids that morning in Kilkenny, no other county, because the Gardaí figured out very quickly that from the direction that we cut south down the back roads. But what happened was every Garda station must have been called on the alert in a big wide area, and in Callan in Kilkenny we would have been coming down one of the back roads there rather than the main Kilkenny Waterford road where we get to Kilmacow, and then more and over to Innistig and different places where all the different volunteers were dispersing. And there was a roadblock on this bridge in Callan because one of the local men that we were with mistook one of the turns. We were not supposed to go through Callan, but in fact there was a couple of Gardaí, and we just roared through the roadblock. We didn't stop, just kept going. But now they were aware it's the Kilkenny boys, okay? And so all raids were in more or less in Kilkenny. So the usual suspects, as they say, they came to all our houses. But so we just said, what? Well, we're out courting women or something. They had no evidence of anything except, unfortunately, in one case, one volunteer had brought a saw belonging to his dad, and he felt he couldn't dump it then once there had been a bit of an alert, or he could have just dumped it, bring nothing, but he brought the bloody home. And I think someone and another guy was, when the Gardaí raided him, and the turn up of his pants was sawdust. But so that could have come from anywhere. It was a farce of a trial. We were all arrested, but there was no evidence whatsoever, like, you know. So the first trial took place in Mount Mellick. And in Mount Mellick, I forget how many of us, I think there was about 10 of us lined up in the dock, charged with an affray, and nothing about explosions, or it was just what the government was so nice was play the whole bloody thing down. They didn't want this embarrassment. It was embarrassing enough for them, but this was double embarrassing because all the cartoons in the paper were just a black piece in the paper, like, and two little voices in little, you know, in little white areas. Is that you, Anthony? But it was totally Anthony, the photographer husband.
Armstrong Jones.
And is that you, Margaret or something? In other words, who had who in the dark in the ball? Because they were dancing next to him, the whole thing. Because we'd blown the power. And of course they were panicked then because all the lights went out and the branch were outside and this massive explosion. And even though it wasn't within several hundred yards, it was back a fair bit, but like up in the sky and in encased metal with a good, you know, an unmerciful bang off it. More so than it was on the ground or in a building. And so there was complete panic, didn't know where they were. So that was the royal visit completely banjacks, if you want to call that. And in fact, no royal visitor came back to Ireland until very, very recently. But it's again, over the past 10-15 years, it's been a softly approach, and then finally the Queen of England herself, and then after that there's, oh, look. But it meant that for, I think, was over 40 years, you hadn't any more of that royal visiting. The same as with the warship, the Brave Brother you were asking me about.
Yeah.
But the trials in Mount Mellick were very interesting, and it's actually very historic, because a massive crowd turned up in Mount Mellick that day to support the IRA men, as they said, the prisoners. The town was packed, and the Gardaí got a hell of a fright, so they brought in reinforcements from everywhere. And an awful lot of old IRAs, they call them, but these would be men who'd served at different times, even from as far back as the Tan War. Remember, this is only the 60s. They're only 40 years after. And several of them, from accounts I had after, had brought old Webley revolvers and all kinds of stuff with them, that if there was going to be a set to, by God, they were going to do their bit. Like, Mount Mellick could have been a far different story than it was. It would have turned.
It was a big riot though, wasn't it?
Oh, it was a big riot.
Yeah.
But had the special branch or anyone fired a shot or pulled, I think it would have been a far different story. Now, this was nothing to do with us. This was just spontaneous from the wide public, where there are, up to the day, most old IRA men would have known where there was an old rifle or particularly a revolver, the short arm as they call them. There was all kinds of antiques, I believe, appeared that day, and with lads hadn't met for 20 or 30 years saying, how will you make us them? And they were showing each other what they had, like, you know. I believe there was museum pieces there, but it could have turned, because it showed that when the body politic was scratched, that the Republican element and resistance and that, the Brits and all that, the memory came out. Within the court then itself, the riot started quite simply enough. It actually started while it was kind of tense outside, to use the word, in the streets, I believe. Within the court, we were all arguing, and we were kind of, if you like, soapbox solicitors. We always defended ourselves while you didn't recognise the court officially. And but we were all handcuffed, which strikes me as very, very odd. Why you should be handcuffed when you're actually being tried. You know you're supposed to be a free man. And a brother of mine, he was younger, came in. I was with him because he was family as part of the you have so many people come in, and he was young. He was only quite innocent young fella. But at one stage, they decided he couldn't come in, and they went to grab him and shut him out or something. And he was trying to say he was related, he was entitled to be in the public gallery or something. So he got a slap from one of the Gardaí. So it happened almost spontaneously, and he was pulled out, and you could hear the door when the guards were pulling him out, glass shattering. When the crowd outside saw the Gardaí man handling this fella, so the crowd there, and within a minute or two, a riot which was there, the tenseness was there because of the situation, blew up. And we were in the court, and of course we then, as best we could, handcuffed, got up to assist. And the Gardaí dragged us, and we all got a good hammering. I know all my nose now, but we survived it all. But the dock was knocked down flat and broken, and the judge ran off the bench, and solicitors and prosecutors were running in every direction, and Gardaí piling. It was like what do you know those American
Keystone Cops?
Yeah, the Keystone Cops thing. It was a riot of a riot, you know what I mean. And so we were all pulled outside then, and in the meantime, about an hour later, in the meantime, every Gardaí from a radius that could be brought in. Well, there are hundreds of guards in the end, and of course they back and charge the crowd. And that's where looking back at it, it's good that some of the older guys didn't just lose their head and pull their revolvers because they had them. I'll tell you right.
Yeah.
But had the special branch or anyone fired a shot or pulled, I think it would have been a far different story. Which would have been a bit of a disaster. A bit of a disaster anyway, because you don't want Irishmen fighting out. This was meant to be what it was, a complete to the British royalty. No, while Ireland is partitioned by you, and there's abnormal relations, then we're not going back to the touching the forelock thing and all this. No, so we were happy we'd done our job. But it could have turned the other way, and it showed you the potential is always there, And the trial, we were eventually taken away when massive reinforcements poured in. A good few people were battened. One poor girl who was in Cumann, Veronica O'Brien, she was a Kilkenny girl, she got a fierce hammering in the head, and I know that girl, Veronica, was quite injured and ill for quite a long time after. The trial resumed, and we fought our case now, and there was no evidence against, except one guy with a saw. But that still wasn't enough evidence to convict anyone. Anyone can have a saw. You have a saw at home, and this wasn't near Abbeyleix. It was down in South Kilkenny. No one was caught on the job. No one had picked up anywhere. But the judge anyway said in the end, we had to be acquitted. There was no evidence. So we were all acquitted, except two guys who had the saw. And the judge decided he had enough on that, just to make some conviction. So he convicted them. But I'm sure if the movement at the time were recognised in courts legally and took an appeal, they'd have been thrown out. There was nothing. And no statements, nothing. But just shows how things can happen. One unfortunate, one of our group protested and said, that's impossible, he said to the judge. They couldn't be guilty, he said. Sure, I was with them. Right to the judge, you were guilty too. So it was funny. As I say, it was like the Keystone Cops thing. And we were all expecting to be set free there and then. The other two, the guys, I'm sentencing you three now, I think it was 3 months, for some minor charges. It's a joke kind of, but there were a couple of months anyway. And we're thinking we're all going this many, and he looks down at us and he says, I observed, he said, the way you behaved in the adjourned court, he said. And we were charged, actually an extra charge before him, with breaking the dock. But we said we couldn't have broken the dock because when the police were grabbing us, the Gardaí, and we were all in the dock handcuffed, with the swaying, everyone, the whole front of the dock collapsed. So that was let go. And we were just on this original thing about disturbance of the peace or something, whatever it was, minor charges. But I am binding you all to the peace for 2 years. I said to him, because I thought I was always a bit of an amateur lawyer, I said, just a minute, Judge, I said, you can't do that. I said, we have been found guilty of nothing. You can't bind someone to the peace that there's no conviction against. And I could be wrong, but as far as I know, you can't. I think it's illegal. But he said, I don't care, he said, I'm binding the peace anyway. He said, sign the bonds. I turned to the lad and said, what do you think? He said, I'm not signing any bond. Because that means to be of good behaviour for 2 years. I'll be as much as sneezed just gone. I said, I'm not going to sign anything, I'm not guilty of anything. And why should I sign anything? And all the boys said, yeah, same applies to us. So the whole lot of us were carted off to Mountjoy jail, guilty and innocent alike, or acquitted alike, if you like. And so we wind up in Mountjoy.
And did you get released then?
Well, what happened then was, we were in Mountjoy a few weeks when a few other prisoners joined us in the meantime. There was a lad from Dublin, I remember, who was putting up postcards or something about the Queen's visit, supporting the actions that were taken. One or two others were shoved in. We had about 13 or 14 in Mountjoy, and we got, as usual, we got a certain little section for ourselves. Well, officially the state never admits political prisoners. But when you go in, the governors are wise enough over the years to know when you get a bunch of these boys, they're not going to wear prison clothes, and they're not going to do what the prison tells them, and so it's far easier just once you have enough men with you. But God help you when you're on your own at times, because you have to fight a hard battle, as I had to do. So I'm only about 6-7 years ago in Cork jail over Section 31. But when you're there with a group, it's amazing how quickly common sense rules, and you have the Republican wing, or you have the Republican section. And that we were all together on our own, and word came that Casement's remains, Roger Casement, are going to be returned to Ireland from Pentonville, and such a time, and there was going to be a state funeral and everything. Now this was leading up to the 50th anniversary of the 1916 Rising, which was a very, very important period of time. And we said, well, that's grand. Like, okay, so the British don't want an embarrassment on their hands in 1916 anniversary of the Jubilee. Is that what you call it? 50th Jubilee anniversary. And we're too emotional. So they're actually kind of cleaning the place, like the Princess Margaret visit and things, what great friends, everything is normal and all, this kind of thing. So Casement home, so no. But then we heard, but he's going to be buried in Glasnevin Cemetery. And we were saying, why Glasnevin Cemetery? Because his famous last words were, well, amongst his last words were, bury me in Morlock Bay, which is a tantrum.
Yeah.
And we're thinking, yeah, okay, but that's not fulfilling his wishes. And by burying him in Glasnevin, and then it said Army engineers, I think it was Army engineers or something, will construct a reinforced grave of concrete, and that, and in other words, to stop him being disinterred maybe and moved more to the remains, the whatever bones or whatever remains of it. So we thought this was a bit of odd, a bit of collaboration, that they should have actually told the British, well, you can hold on to Casement until we have the United Ireland. Because all we're doing, what's happening there is kind of lowering any kind of embarrassment for Britain. And certainly into Glasnevin. So we made a decision amongst us. We always would sit down all together and we say, right, I was appointed as the officer commanding. That's where lads pick out their, and that I had been more or less in charge of the thing in Abbeyleix anyway. So I was just OC, officer commanding. So I just had a meeting with all the lads and said, what do you think, boys? And we always try and work with a consensus of opinion. So you're representing everybody. And we said, we think we should make some mark for Casement's homecoming, a rather strange homecoming. First of all, we are in here as Republicans because we're protesting against British royalty, and we're going to be in jail, and what Casement died for, an independent Ireland, free, people in control of their own lives without foreign interference. And here it's a misnomer. So we said the only thing we can do is, for the 2 or 3 days of these ceremonies they're going to have in Dublin, to let the British off the hook to a large degree, I propose we do a 2 or 3 day hunger strike. And that'll get a little bit of publicity, because we were now kind of news, you know, the Princess Margaret attackers, or what they called us, and all the jokes will be all there trying to take her off, Tony, as they called him, or were we in the darkness having a dance with her, or what, you know, there were lots of jokes. It was actually very humorous with the public. So we had a certain prestige, if you like, and for us to go on hunger strike then for casement, so which we would have done, but it wouldn't have been to the death. It was just during the 2 or 3 days, a tokenism, right? And I was called down to the governor's office, and he just said, oh, by the way, he said, get all your things together. He said, you're leaving. I thought we were leaving for go to another prison. I couldn't figure out what it was. And he said, you're being discharged. I said, why? Because we were both being for 3 months, you know, or until we signed these bonds to keep the peace. So we were all released, went in, signed for our stuff, got our stuff on, came out, front gates, there was photographs taken, and I don't have them with me at the minute, but there's one on the steps you saw, you know, that one with the whole group, with Cahill Goulding and all after, the chief of that. We were released, but that day on the news, and that was the day that casement, it was the first day of honouring casement up in Arbour Hill, the chapel where Pearson and all them are the remains are, and casement was there in lying in state, and so we were told more or less like, well now lads, you've got the attention in Ireland and you actually have international attention, so you'll be going up to Arbour Hill just after lunch, and to get great publicity for the movement. Goulding said, you know, it's what we need, and we, you know, and it's good, like good. This is good publicity. So for ye to march in, he said, in the group, he said, and lay a wreath at casement, etc. We said, well now, just a minute, we decided that we were going to do a bit of a hunger strike inside Mountjoy, and I said, obviously the government heard this because we had announced it to the prison staff that we would be refusing food during the few days of this funeral. So the government must have said, geez, too big an embarrassment. So we were just thrown out actually out of the prison. So we said to Goulding, Cahill Goulding, and I said, well now, with all due respect, we feel it's a bit of a travesty, and in a way letting Britain off the hook. It's honouring casement and not honouring them at the same time. We believe we should go to Morlock Bay and lay a wreath there, and that hopefully someday the remains will follow. And said if we do that, that's going to cement the thing about casement for the future. Obviously it's not going to happen now, but we think it should be done. And so a deal was made that if we went up, we were going to refuse to go to Arbour Hill. But if we went to Arbour Hill, but then how could you not go? You're the people in the news, like. So we made the deal that the movement would provide the bus. We'd go to Arbour Hill, lay the wreath, pay our respects, which we would anyway. Like, you know?
There is a photograph of you, like a colour party.
Oh, coming in the gates,
coming
yes.
in the gates of
with the
Arbour Hill.
wreath supplied. So we did all that, and we then had another wreath. We got 2 wreaths. The second one was put into the fairly big minibus that we had provided for us, and we marched in. We paid our respects to casement, to the private prayers and things, and marched back out. So that went down a ton with the movement, and you know, got good publicity, etc. We then struck for Morlock Bay. We arrived up there in the evening, and we went down this very narrow, tricky path, which it was then. I don't know what it's like now. right to where this grave space is reserved for the remains of Sir Roger Casement, or whenever. So we laid our wreath there, came to attention, had the tricolour with the salute, did a ceremony, and then got in the bus to go back to Dublin.